Good morning and welcome to everyone who are here with us in person. Marami pong salamat for being here. And for those who are attending the event virtually, since we are also simultaneously broadcasting this through Facebook Live and Zoom. This is the first episode of the monthly ethics seminar of the UP Diliman Research Ethics Board for the year 2025. For everyone who's just joining us for the first time, this public service information drive is a regular mainstay activity of the UPD Research Ethics Board happening every month. Ideally, every second Thursday of the month, but we adjust as we go. It features lectures and discussions about the responsible and ethical conduct of research, most especially those involving human participants. So much of the topics are most relevant to the current and very diverse research and scholarly needs of UP Diliman and other academic institutions, mindful of the requirements to always be up to date with the latest ethical approaches and standards in the conduct of research. This is designed to be informal and conversational, hence the term etika inan, etika alaman, and also the idea of having conversations and exchange of insights over lunch. So I'm Gretchen Velarde, the coordinator of the UPT Reb and your moderator for today's discussion. Before we begin, please allow us to read some reminders to all of our participants. Oh, sorry. Okay. Everyone is encouraged to have their lunch while listening to guest speaker. Please take note of your questions. We have an open forum allotted for participating actively in polls, Q&As, and discussions. And make sure to keep your microphone muted when not speaking. And to receive your certificates, please fill out the evaluation form that will be given at the end of this seminar series. So for those who are attending on site, you will be receiving a certificate of a participation and certificates of attendance will be given to online participants. So without any further ado, we are here and glad to welcome our first speaker for this year. Um, for this month's ethics seminar, Dr. Maria Corazon de Ungria with her lecture on ethical issues in forensic genetic testing. So a brief backgrounder about Dr. De Ungria. So she is the founding chair of the UP Diliman Research Ethics Board and the head of the DNA Analysis Laboratory of the Natural Sciences Research Institute. She was also a former director of the program on biodiversity, ethnicity, and forensics at the Philippine Genome Center. Dr. De Ungria obtained her Bachelor of Science from Macquarie University in Australia in 1993 and her PhD in microbiology from the University of South Wales in 1999. She was a professorial lecturer in the College of Science, UP Diliman, and having received dozens of prestigious local and international awards like her conferment as an academician by the National Academy of Science and Technology. Dr. De Ungria marries honor with excellence by devoting her work to worthy causes such as the institutional protection of the rights of indigenous people in the context of science and research. Again, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Maria Corazon de Ungria. Thank you. Thank you. Kanina. Tanang asan ko?
Okay, magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. I hope I don't need to speak in very formal, but I'd like to welcome everyone as Gretchen has said, welcome to the mess. Somebody was actually laughing at our abbreviations. Welcome to the mess, the monthly ethics seminars series. All right. Okay. So syempre we are wanting that this whole year to be powerhouse with different topics or about different topics, the ethics about different topics. And my lecture, my assignment today is on ethical issues in forensic genetics. So first of all, let's define forensic genetics. Forensic genetics is a branch of science that applies genetic analysis to criminal investigations, identification of human remains, and resolving legal disputes, regardless of whether that's civil or criminal disputes. DNA profiling compares genetic material from biological samples collected from crime scenes, from victims and suspects to establish connections or confirm identities. Narinig ba ako? Taas pa ulit. Okay. It plays a key role in cases of paternity, sexual assault, missing persons, human trafficking, and disaster victim identification. So, this actually summarizes the work that we do at the DNA analysis lab, particularly in forensic genetic testing, and also the interactions that we have with our law enforcement agencies. Technological advances have made this field highly reliable, although there are ethical and privacy issues, which will be covered in today's lecture. All right. So alam natin, hindi parang hindi nyo pala alam, sasabihin ko, ma'am, ilan ba ang forensic DNA lab sa Pilipinas? That's the first question. And the answer to that is there are three forensic DNA laboratories in the Philippines that conduct DNA testing in the Philippines. There are other centers that actually say they are DNA centers, but they actually collect samples here and then send the samples overseas. So let's focus on the three Philippine Forensic DNA Laboratories. We have two that are from law enforcement, the Philippine National Police, which was established in year 2000, and the National Bureau of Investigation, which was established in 1998. The DNA Analysis Lab, ay, bakit ay, dali atras. Forward, back, ah, ay, alin ba ito mga, ako, yan ang back, hahawakan. Ano siya lang, motion sensitive. All right. So we've got here, as you can see here, this is the DNA analysis laboratory here at the Natural Sciences Research Institute. We were established in 1996 through a memorandum of agreement between between the Philippine Anti-Crime Commission and the University of the Philippines, with the overall objective that it would be a tripartite collaboration. So yung DNA lab dito sa UP would be conducting or more focus on research activities because we're not law enforcement that we would later share with law enforcement, the Philippine National Police and NBI, who could actually conduct the criminal investigations. So that was the concept or that was the plan in 1996. And throughout the years until now, 2024, we've tried to be able to work that agreement and operationalize it. The main message of this particular slide is that UP is the only university-based research DNA laboratory that can be at times asked or not asked actually, um, ordered by Philippine courts to also conduct DNA tests in relation to the other, in relation to an investigation. Effective. Okay, so we've done a lot of research. I'll show you some of the papers that we've published through the years. Here are some of our bone work, mainly authored by our bone person, Miss Kevelyn Kalakal and her team, done on autosomal degraded femur samples, on different types of samples that had been collected largely from disaster victims or samples from human remains that need to be identified. So the application of this type of analysis is really for human remains identification associated with missing persons or disasters. The main message of this particular slide is that when we're dealing with these types of samples, the quantities of those DNA in those bones are actually very small, minimal, and therefore we need to take that into account. Lately, we still have the bone projects ongoing, particularly focused on the application for extrajudicial extrajudicial killing investigations of those types of crimes. Bakit sumusobra? Okay, next. Gumagalaw ba siya? Nagpo-forward siya on its own kahit hindi ko siya hinahawakan? Hindi. Hindi, oh yan, oh, hindi ko siya hinahawakan. People, so okay, sige, sige. I'm away. All right. So this set of papers that we published is our research focused on on handling DNA associated with sexual assault investigations. So you could see here we've got the YSCR analysis. This is a set of markers located on the Y chromosome, which is found only in male individuals. And males, pasensya na males ha, pati kayo nandyan sa online Males, 90 to 95% of perpetrators in a sexual assault investigation is a male. So it was very important for us to develop or to actually validate protocols that focuses on why DNA, so that we are able to differentiate DNA from the victim, usually female, and DNA of the perpetrator, who is usually male. Usually, not all the time. So these are some of the work that we've done, and this is actually one main message here. Also, is that when we're dealing with sexual assault investigations, one, there are vulnerable populations, of course, the victims, children, and this is a difficult type of analysis. Why? We're dealing with samples that contain more than one DNA, usually the victim's DNA and the perpetrator's DNA. So looking at mixtures, relationships, and quantities. Also in the Philippines, I don't know so much in other countries, but in the Philippines, we've encountered a number of rape incest cases, which means that the complexity of the analysis is even increased because the DNA found in the child could actually be associated with the perpetrator. Perpetrator being the child's father or the child's grandfather or somebody related to the child. All right, so bank this in different parts of your head as we go through the ethical issues in these types of testing. At this stage, we need to differentiate. Ma'am, ano ba, when you talk about samples, what do you mean? What do you really mean? There, ito importanteng message, ah. We need to differentiate between crime scene samples and reference samples. Crime scene samples usually, those are at an example of probative samples. They can prove that a person was present at the crime scene. Bakit nandiyan ang DNA mo? Na nasa crime scene ka, hindi ko sinabing ikaw yung guilty ha, basta't nasa crime scene ka. Anong ginagawa mo sa crime scene? Are you either the perpetrator or the victim or an eyewitness? So there's reason for the presence of your DNA at the crime scene, and the role of the investigators are to find out why you were there using DNA and other samples or other evidences to be able to reconstruct the crime scene. So basically, when you talk about crime scenes, could be our biological material collected from the crime scene, usually blood, semen, saliva, urine. Ma'am, bakit pati urine? Paminsan, pag may nagnanakaw o may magnanakaw, nagaantay siya. Matagal siya dun. So either kinailangan niyang etc. Or can be also cigarette butts. Yung saliva on cigarette butts, bakit? Naninigarilyo siya habang inaantay niya kung kailan ang pinaka critical time para niya gawin yung gagawin niya. And then that could link the as I've said, that could link the person to the incidences related to the crime. So basically, when we talk about crime scene samples, those are samples that we do not know the identities. Sino itong may-ari o saan nanggaling itong sample na 'to. That's different from reference samples. When we talk about reference samples, which could either be a suspect's reference sample or a victim's reference sample or an eyewitness reference sample, when we talk about reference samples, we actually refer to samples na kinuha from a person whose identity is known. So nakita ng pulis, kinunan si suspect, inarrest si suspect, kinunan ng sample. Ma'am, hindi ba crime scene sample? Hindi mo crime scene yun. Reference yun. Why? Because we know the identity. We know the identity of that particular sample. That's the main difference between crime scene and reference samples. Okay, next. So this is our standard procedure, our general workflow of DNA profiling or DNA testing. And we won't go through this particular set of procedures in this lecture, promise. Nilagay ko lang yan dyan. So basically, there are standard molecular procedures for handling different types of samples. We need to get the DNA from that particular type of sample, whether it's bone, whether it's urine, whether it's semen. Kailangan ng scientists kunin yung DNA kung ano man yung sample na yan. Then it undergoes through quantitation. Kailangan natin malaman gaano karami ba yan. And then because then it affects the downstream processing of samples. Pag maraming DNA, mas marami kang magagawa. Kung mas konting DNA, we need to be very, very careful in planning or formulating a strategy for downstream processing. Then we have DNA amplification and DNA fragment analysis. These are standard procedures to generate the DNA profile, or before they call it the DNA fingerprint. Ano yung profile ng sample na yan, which we will then use to compare with potential suspects or victims, if that is, depending on the question we're asking. So, very clear, I hope, what that procedure is, schematically. Pero importante, and when we're talking about ethics in forensic genetic testing, the steps before DNA testing are actually the critical steps. Why? Because ethical issues come in terms of how samples were collected, and that's what we will discuss. The activities or procedures done before a sample reaches the lab. Sa lab, standard procedure na yan. Pero na yung standard operating procedure. But what we need to examine is how those samples were actually collected. Did the person who saw, or did the person, halimbawa reference sample yan, did the person know that a sample was being collected from him or her? Did he consent? Etc. So those are the things that we will discuss. And also, when we're talking about ethics in forensic genetic testing, the questions of what happens to the sample afterwards and what happens to the information generated from the sample after the testing. These are the two critical areas before laboratory procedures are conducted and after laboratory procedures are conducted. Those are the critical points where there are many data privacy concerns and informed consent concerns, which are your basic bulk of ethics in genetic testing. And this is what we're going to discuss now. So let's talk about criminal DNA databases. So, balik tayo, di ba? We had the sample, pre-process sa lab, and then what happens to the sample? In other countries, usually, pag nanonood kayo ng CSI, take this to CODIS. That's the US DNA database. Okay, so what happens to the sample after the sample was profiled? There are two things that would have been generated. Well, two things that you need to take into account. One is the information from the sample. Yan yung DNA profile. These are just numeric information that tells us what the genetic profile. So information yan. Plus the second type that we should be aware of is the biological sample. So we did the DNA testing, biological sample and DNA. So, pre-process yan, meron ka na-generate na data, your DNA profile, meron kang natirang biological sample, at meron ka pang DNA. So, you've got the profile and the biological samples with the DNA. When we talk about criminal DNA databasing, we need to take that into consideration. What is being discussed? What is being stored? Who has access to the sample? Who has access to the information, etc. So we know that DNA, and we'll continue this. So we will help you answer those questions in a while. When we talk about criminal DNA databasing, we're talking about the technology that is very powerful for human identification. Alam natin that our DNA is specific to us except for identical twins. Your identical twin will have exactly the same DNA profile generally with kambal. But most people who don't have identical twins, it's our own, something that makes us different from others is our DNA. Therefore, when we have a very specific DNA for a person that identifies that person, it's one of the most powerful tool for human identification. And in fact, for the forensic scientists in the audience, in fact, DNA is one of the primary identifiers. There are three. Nicole, participation. What are the three primary identifiers? DNA, dental. Very good. So from our audience, there's participation. There are three primary identifiers: DNA, odontology, dental, and then fingerprint. So why do we call them primary identifiers? these technologies are amongst the most powerful because using the analyzing this data allows us to really identify um, uh, using the evidence that we were able to gather at the crime scene. Anyway, so once we have a DNA profile, it accelerates investigation and hopefully prevents wrongful convictions. Because if you have a DNA profile at the crime scene, you think that should actually come or from the body of a victim, compare it with a suspect. If the suspect's DNA profile does not match the DNA profile of the semen collected from the victim, that means he does not own it. And therefore, that actually changes the dynamics of that criminal investigation. All right. However, ang problema natin in other countries, Europe, the US, Canada, Malaysia, etc., there are already laws that were promulgated that have been used to establish criminal databases. One challenge in the Philippines is since 1999, I think that was the first bill that was filed, we have not been able to graduate the 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 bill to a republic act. Ay, pareho yun. The tama, bill. Have not been able to graduate to a republic act law. And so we're still discussing. There are actually, I think there are about 3 or 4 bills in the Senate and in Congress proposing for the establishment of a criminal DNA database in the Philippines. Not yet there, not yet passed. All right. The challenge here is that very powerful nga yung DNA databasing because it actually is a compilation of DNA profiles collected from crime scenes. Yan yung sa US and in other countries sa crime scenes. That also has the DNA profiles on convicted offenders. That may have DNA profiles depending on the law of arrestees. And what happens is that when there is an investigation, a criminal database, as you see on TV, may be used to search in situations where we have a DNA profile from the crime scene, and then our question is, sino ba ang pwedeng suspect dun sa crime? We don't have a suspect during the investigation. Then one thing that can be done is actually get the DNA profile and search the database. So yan yung mga phrase, take this to CODIS. One problem in the Philippines is that kung sakasakali magkaroon tayo ng DNA database, there are quite a number of individuals and institutions that are wary of potential abuses. About the management, the security, and access to the sample biobank, who has access to the DNA? Alam niyo, pagka mayroong access, hindi yan ni-regulate, access to a database. Anybody can go, if it's not properly regulated, someone can go to the ref or the freezer, take the DNA, and actually use it to plant evidence. And whatever else forensic scientists do, if there is planted DNA at the crime scene, that will be the DNA profile. And we cannot say anymore because of what had happened. Also, who has access to the actual DNA profiles. DNA profiles, sorry, I didn't put a DNA profile here, actually consists of numbers that will tell us what numbers are specific to an individual. DNA profile consists of numbers very specific to the individual. If somebody hacks the DNA database, the DNA profile database, hacks it and changes those numbers, if we do not have secure protocols to prevent that from happening, that could also be a problem in the future. Sorry. So here it says here, Unisys is actually um, uh, security index was a Unisys security index was done per country, and the Philippines ranked as the first. What it tells us in 2018 is that in the Philippines we had the highest, based on their survey, the highest mistrust in our government, so that the highest mistrust that the government could manage the DNA database properly. That was 20. I could not find a later survey, but that was the data that was released in 2018. All right. So the DNA profiles and also the biobank of human biological samples. And a year, no, not year, not yeah, a year ago, I was actually several years I was asked to comment. We were asked to comment on proposed DNA bills that are now being discussed in Congress and the Senate. And in one particular, in a couple of proposed DNA bills in Congress and in the Senate, I was actually surprised at what was contained in the DNA bill. There are the indices in the proposed DNA bills: crime scene, arrested persons, convicted offender, detainee. Okay lang yan. Pero what struck me in the proposed bills is that kung hindi ko hinahawakan, magalaw ko. Okay, uy, ewan ko yung inyong ginawa. Okay. In the proposed bills, and I put it there in red, besides your standard arrested person, convicted offender, detainee, etc., it was in the proposed DNA bill to include street beggars and children. And during the committee hearing, I asked, what is the merit of including street beggars and children? Again, this is a very ethical concern. Isasama yung bata. Ang criminal database is criminal database. Pasensya na, hindi ko sasabihin kung sino siya. Pero ang sabi dun sa discussion in that particular hearing was, ma'am, kasi mataas ang rate of criminality in the streets. So basically, we're already presuming that our street beggars, although that they would eventually become criminals. So maaga pa lang, ilagay na natin sa database para pag nag-search tayo, nandyan na sila. That's a major ethical concern. And beggars. Tapos meron yung missing persons, hinahanap naman talaga. Pero nakita ko din nandiyan sa index, nasa index, Bisaya, sorry. Nasa index is government personnel. Which means tayo yan, ha? Tayo yan. Sa University of the Philippines, our DNA profiles will be included in the database. Why are you going to search me? What did I do? What did I deserve to be on the database? And later you will see that has greater impact because of the technology, the sensitivity of technologies that now are being developed in other countries. And there are volunteers that could also provide, etc. So I thought that's a bit of a big question in terms of ethics in including this groups of individuals in the criminal. Isa pang tanong ko, alam ninyo 'pag nag-DNA profiling, hindi kami mayaman na, talaga UP hindi mayaman 'yan. Pero one DNA profile actually costs about 80,000 pesos to generate. So if you've got street children and beggars, isasama mo sila. So sinasabi ng bill na naka-propose at that time, gawan mo ng DNA profile, that's 80,000. However many street beggars there are, 80,000 times however many number. If you really conceptualize it, I thought there was some moral error there. Because if you really want development, why not invest the money, that 80,000 pesos times however many number of children, to the Department of Social Welfare and Development to come up with programs for those children that will take them off the streets in the proper way, not as part of a DNA profile. And the same thing, for government personnel, 80,000, sweldo mo na lang sa amin yan. Hindi na kami magnanakaw, dagdag mo sa sahod namin yan, hindi kami magnanakaw. So, may Magna Carta benefits pa, may laundry lang. That's a lot of money. Puta na ni DNA profile that's not properly conceptualized. That was my criticism. I think baka tinanggal na ngayon eh. But I was surprised it came out there. Okay. Okay, now you kind of looked at those questions. Let's go back into really capturing what those ethical concerns are. We talked about consent and privacy. Again, wala tayo ngayon sa Pilipinas, wala pa tayong batas. But there had been different versions of DNA bills na kung saan natin, hindi ko sasabihin kinopya, kinuha or binarrow from different countries. And there are issues because different countries would include in their database arrestees. Mama na yung arrestees. Arrestees, hinuli ka, pagkatapos hindi ka ba convicted ha? Hindi ka pa nga napupunta kay judge. Hinuli ka, part of your photo session is the collection of a biological sample, routine, para maisama ka na sa database. Whether you're convicted or not, is not the issue. You've been arrested. Could be suspects. So yun, medyo mas malapit-lapit kasi there's reason for you to be a suspect. And then convicted offenders, those that have been. Pero ang tanong mo dyan, ano naman yung type of crime? Before, now tinanggal nila. Before in the US, sorry, in the United Kingdom, before 2007, it doesn't matter whatever reason you were arrested for. Wala yung type of crime, heinous crime, hindi. Nag-violate ka ng traffic law, inarrest ka, kuna ka na ng sample. Your DNA will be there in the database. Tanggalin ba nila? Hindi. Your DNA will be forever in the database until I think it was about 2005, 2007 when European human rights groups actually questioned that practice, and then the government removed arrestee samples from the data. What are the types of tests? Hindi naman naka-define that the test would only be, in some laws, hindi naka-define that the test will only be restricted to forensic application. Paano kung biglang, pasensya na, nakikita ko ginagawa yan paminsan sa ating mga cellphone namin, yung number natin, biglang napupunta, parang nakukuha ng iba, biglang binibentahan ka na ng kondo, binibentahan ka na ng sapatos, di ko alam kung sino nagbebenta. Paano niya nakuha yung telepono ko? So there are situations where that happens. And the challenge here is if we do not have the right safeguards, those information in terms of or access to the samples could actually be accessed by individuals who have not been authorized. If there is no safeguard to state in that law that should not be done. So tests could be in terms of medical susceptibility to disease, medical conditions, which are potential sources of discrimination. And then, of course, we talked about access to samples. One thing, ito tinanong ko to, hindi ako sinagot masyado. Kung halimbawa, picture niyo na lang. Again, this is ethical concerns. Hinuli, dinala sa pulis. Sir, kukunan ka namin ng sample. Ayoko. Sir, kunan ka namin sample kasi part ng procedure namin. Ayoko nga. We do not have protocols or defined protocols up to what force, in quotation, can institutions exert to make people provide samples. Nakikita natin paminsan sa TV, they actually found a way around this eh. Manonood ka sa CSI, bibigyan kang tubig. Dali lang yan. Pag alis mo, naka-forcep na yan. Nagwa-wipe na yan dun sa rim rim nung baso. Bakit? Nandun yung saliva mo eh. Diba? So yung iba, actually what they do, they don't leave anything or they don't take anything. But other than that, if in a normal scenario, how much force is allowed if you are only an arrest? Okay, so consent and privacy issues. Do I consent? Do people consent to provide samples for genetic testing? And then how much genetic testing is done such that privacy issues are considered? Ethical concerns is misuse of data. And here I'm going to talk a bit more about the types of technology. There are actually 3 more recent technologies that are now being used or that could potentially be misused. We've got here different individuals with different ethnicities, etc. So what used to happen, but we had crime scene samples and you've got suspects. Generally before, in the early days of forensic DNA testing, you have a crime scene sample, generate a DNA profile of that crime scene sample. Generate a DNA profile of the suspect. Tapos kukumpare mo. Ang tanong mo, sa kanya ba galing yan? Pag hindi nag-match, tawag natin dyan exclusion. Hindi nag-match, ma'am. Baka ibang tao. Ibang tao talaga. Hindi nag-match. Hindi galing kay suspect. However, what has happened is that, okay, let me go through this later. Kasi nandito na tayo. Tapusin ko na lang yung ano. What has happened is that there are technologies that now allows us to compare hindi 100% matches. So, In the database, I'll go back to this later on. What we've got is this what we call intrusive database searches. Where, if anybody's interested, there's a very interesting article released by the National Institute of Justice in the US, which covers and explains more specific this technology. This is what we call familial DNA searching and also partial match searching. Ma'am, ano yan? So, pag kinumpare mo yung DNA profile at the crime scene, di ba, pag hindi nag-match yan sa database na 100% match, what you can do, one, in familial DNA searching, there are computer programs that allows police to search their criminal database. Ang question mo dan, yung crime scene DNA profile, may kamag-anak ba dyan sa criminal database? So, hindi sila kasali hahanapan mo ng kamag-anak yung DNA mo, wala silang reason to be searched. Ito yung inaano nila concern is unlawful search and unlawful searches. Wala kang information about these individuals except that their DNA profiles may be in the database. So, your question is, kamag-anak ba niya, yung DNA profile sa crime scene? Also, in a different way, okay, so yan yung familial DNA searching. This particular report actually explains this very, very well. There's another way. Ay, ma'am, paano kung wala kaming software? There's what we call partial DNA partial matching. So you don't have that FDS software to ask if there are relatives in the database. And then, ang mangyayaring gagawin mo is, you will lower the stringency. So kung may DNA profile ka at the crime scene, before, kailangan ng 100% match. Lahat ng component ng crime scene profile dapat nandoon sa hinahanap mo sa database. And usually yan, 20, after 2017, 20 different DNA genes or markers are searched. Dapat 20 out of 20. Pag pinartial DNA search mo yan, bababa mo yung stringency mo. So pagka merong tumama na 17, pwede. Pag may tumama na 18, pwede. O bakit pwede? Kasi ang konsepto niyan is that if there are more matches, but not 100%, potentially the crime scene sample is a relative of that person na merong partial match. Why? It's a genetic basis. Our DNA are closer to our brothers and sisters, to our relatives, because we come from one source. So ngayon, ang iimbestigahan is yung relatives ng partial matches. Again, unlawful search. Because there was no reason to search except that you have the DNA profile. So those are ethical concerns. So familial DNA searching and partial match searching. Ay, balik lang tayo. Okay. So this could be, and the reason why we brought that is the misuse of data. Data was used to come up with suspect and then surveillance of close DNA matches. These are the relatives of that particular person. Where there was no reason to actually monitor them. Babantayan yan, observe yan ng mga police and investigate. And one clear question here is that there are certain ethnicities that may have particular particular signals on their population. And the US particularly was criticized because they have more proportions of the Black Americans. And therefore, pagka nag-DNA searches ka, mas marami kang makukuhang tao from that population. And mas marami kang babantayan, ang police in terms of their relatives, etc. Okay. The other ethical concern in genetic testing is also the impact of mishandling evidence. If you are not very careful, DNA is actually very, very powerful. But if we do not follow SOPs, our standard operating procedures, if we're not careful with our genetic testing, the situation in the Philippines also has this, wherein the judges or the lawyers may not fully understand the limitations of the technology and could put extra weight on the uh, significance of the DNA profile and could convict even if the results are limited. So that's what this is actually a photo of the National Bilibid Prison, where potential wrongful convictions because of mishandling of evidence could lead to the incarceration of those individuals. The fourth ethical concern, and this I'll have to explain a bit better, is bias and equity. There's a difference between, and this is very important in our research, there's a difference between criminal databases that I've been talking about and also what we call population reference databases. So yung criminal database, that's populated by the DNA profiles of convicted offenders. In some states in the US, also arrestees, but those, and then missing individuals. So those databases, kung paano sila na-establish, was actually in relation to a crime or a missing incident for the missing persons. But not generally any. Yun lang, talaga kailangan merong crime or may missing person. That's what they have in the criminal data. When we talk about population database, which is what we study here in the DNA analysis lab, we're talking about studies to understand the genetic variation across different populations. So halimbawa sa Pilipinas, we've got different types of or different groups of individuals, such as our indigenous communities, which I will talk a bit more, or different groups. Ma'am, nagkakaiba ba talaga ang Ilocano at Bisaya o magkaiba lang sila sa lengguwahe? We'll cover that a bit. But ang importante dito is when we talk about criminal databases, they are different from reference population data. And the reference population databases answers different questions from a criminal database. A criminal database answers the question, who is the source of that probative sample or that crime scene sample? Population reference databases are usually used to understand how different or similar are our individuals in a population, which are then used when we are doing statistical analysis of matching DNA evidence. We talked a bit about criminal databases. There are, and I'll just pass through this because we passed through this a while ago. When we talk about criminal databases, there are different levels. We don't have it in the Philippines, but in the US, they've got local DNA index, they've got state index, and they've got national DNA index. So these are jurisdictional levels for the criminal database. Pagka nag-investigate sa local level, pwede nilang i-search yung database nila. Pero hindi nila pwedeng i-search yung FBI. It goes through a one-way street, a one-way path, local database, tapos there's a certain time agreed upon wherein the local profiles are then searched, are sent to the state laboratories, which then search the criminal database at the state level. Pero hindi na yan babalik sa local. And then pag wala pa rin ako, if they want to find out if this particular profile matches any crime in other states, alam mo nangyari sa Texas, pumunta ba siya sa California to commit another crime there? Well, then that will then go up to the higher level, which is the national DNA index system. So there are ways to do searches, but there are safeguards in terms of how those searches are done. But So, in that particular article that I said from the National Institute of Justice, there are ways of handling the familial DNA searches and the partial matches. So again, when we do these searches, there are possibilities of being able to detect matches. What do we do with these matches? And then what do the police do to make sure that that their searches and their monitoring will actually be within the boundaries of the law that has been passed. Hindi pwede na basta, ay meron akong DNA profile, babantayan ko na lang yung kamag-anak niya. That's unlawful search. Okay. All right. Ayan, let's now focus on the Philippine Population Reference Database. Ma'am, what are the ethical issues about Philippine Population Reference Database? All right. We have here in the DNA analysis app what we want to do when we come up with a Philippine Population Reference Database is to actually we've adopted an inclusive strategy. Kung bakit kailangan ng inclusive strategy? It is because we want to maximize the utility of the reference database. Ano bang ginagamit? Saan ginagamit yung reference population database? The reference population database is used when we do statistical calculations on matching DNA evidence. I'll explain that a bit better. Halimbawa, merong crime, may DNA profile. Nag-match siya kay suspect. Your next question is, yung match ba ng DNA profile at the crime scene and the suspect, is that a real match or what we call a chance match? Huh? Meron bang chance match, ma'am? Meron. Halimbawa, kung DNA, I give this example. Mamang pulis, ano, ninakaw po yung ako, ninakaw po yung cellphone ko. O nakita mo kung sino nagnakaw? Opo, opo. O describe mo nga yung nagnakaw. Mamang pulis, itim ang buhok. Okay. So the mere fact na itim yung buhok, it's so common in the Philippines. And any person can be, o lahat kayo suspect. Except yung nag-dye ng buhok, di ba? O yung walang buhok. Um, suspect. Why? Because that particular characteristic is so common in the Philippine population that the match is not indicative that that person is the real source. That's what you call a chance match. Pero kung sa mamang pulis, may nunal sa gitna ng ilong. Wala pa akong huhulihin dito. Wala pa akong suspect. Why? Because that is a rarer characteristic. So back to the Philippine population database. That's the impact of the work of the DNA analysis lab here at the Natural Sciences Research Institute. We want to study the genetics, the genomics of different Philippine population groups to be able to understand what is a rare DNA profile and what is a common DNA profile in the Philippine population, which is different from the German populations or different from the Americans or different from other countries, other ethnicities. Ma'am, pwede ba natin gamitin yan para ma-identify natin kung si Alice Guo ay Pilipino? Tsaka na natin pag-usapan mo. Naka-Facebook live tayo eh. Tanungin niyo lang ako mamaya in private. Alright, so that's the value of the Philippine population reference database. So there's no way that the population reference database should not be used to investigate a crime. Should only be used for statistical estimates of matching DNA evidence. But can you use a reference population database for criminal investigation to find an individual? Potentially, yes. Why? You have the DNA profile. And actually, pero that's the need for proper safeguards and procedures that does not allow the handlers and handlers of that database to do those searches. That's the big ethical concern. That's why we need to trust the institutions that handle and safeguard the DNA database. Those are numbers. Parang pera. Ma'am, bad bang pera? Depende kung paano mo nakuha. Bad bang pera? Depende kung paano mo ginamit. On its own, it's not. But how we use and access those data is the big question. So, anyway, tuloy lang natin. And in fact, importante, when we talk about Philippine Reference Database, we need to also be inclusive. I've said that word before. Inclusive, bakit? Kasi kung puro Metro Manila lang yan, kung ang krimen nangyari sa Davao o nangyari sa isolated community in Surigao, for example, then are we actually doing statistical calculations very close? Is that a real estimate or knowledge of the genomic variation in that locality where the crime occurred? Are we considering all the factors? So we need to actually in the Philippines consider the ethnicity of our group. Why? Because we have mainstream populations, Tagalog, Ilocano, dun sa mga nasa lungsod. But we also have over 110 ethno-linguistic groups, indigenous communities that are listed by the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples as IPs. Tanong naman, pareho ba ang DNA profile ni Kuya Kuya Hanunoo from Mindoro at saka yung dyan sa Cubao? Di natin alam. Until, as part of our work in science, until we explore do the test and generate that particular raw data. This is the work of the DNA analysis lab through different programs that had been funded throughout the years. In fact, here as a background, we have over 7,641 islands. We have over 110 million people. We are culturally diverse. Here, hindi nyo nababasa sa likod, pero siguro nakikita ninyo sa Facebook Live. Actually listed dyan, hindi to hindi to mainstream populations. What are listed are the indigenous communities that are included in the NCIP list. Aromanen, Teduray, Bagobo, Manobo, Ubo Manobo, Higaonon, Subanen, etc. So we need to consider, and in our work, there are certain groups that are more isolated than others geographically. There are some groups that are socially isolated because they are discriminated upon by the general population. Are those situations influence sasabihin ko sa the mating patterns, parang Drosophila, sorry the way these groups form communities, form families. Bakit? Eh, siyempre, kung nasa bundok ka, manliligaw ka ba sa kabilang bundok? Ang hirap naman manligaw. Tagal naman maglakad para manligaw. So, likely, yung mga mapapangasawa, likely, not all the time, likely, yung mapapangasawa mo to form your families would be individuals closer to your residence where you are. And that could form a more knit communities. But that doesn't stop you from going there. So, paano natin malalaman kung hindi natin aaralin? And that's what the work of the DNA analysis lab. And we've got a funded program now from the Philippine Council for Health Research and Development. Dr. Montoya, tuloy mo yung funding if you're on Facebook Live. Phase 2. All right. So the Filipino Genomes Research Program had been supported by PCHRD for the last 5 years. We're asking for phase 2. We've been supported by the Commission on Higher Education. We've been supported by the University of the Philippines. Throughout the years, we've been supported by the European Union. We really want to understand the level of genetic and genomic diversity across different populations, inclusive of indigenous communities. Ang challenge sa atin is that with indigenous communities, if you look at the 2022 guidelines on ethics, the national guidelines on research involving human participants, indigenous communities are amongst the vulnerable populations. Why? Alam naman natin, economically, not all, many of those communities are very poor. So there's economic vulnerability. Many of those communities, many IP groups are actually discriminated upon either by the general population or amongst the community. So there is social vulnerability. There are groups that are culturally isolated. So what the National Commission on Indigenous People and those who want to do research with IPs take note, you actually have to come up, submit a application for ethics review and clearance to an accredited research ethics committee of the Philippine Health Board, combining the requirements of that ethics clearance with the requirements of the National Commission on Indigenous People. Hindi lang pwede, ay, si kuya ko nagtatrabaho dun sila eh. Punta kami, hindi pwede yun. So there needs to be proper permissions and proper procedures in order to protect the rights of the IP. And here, we've actually summarized schematically the different steps. Medyo mahaba-haba yan, so hindi ko na siya i-go through. The important here is this ethics monitoring of project compliance with approved protocol from start to end. On this level are the IP communities, the researcher. This is what we need to do. There is the NCIP provincial office, and there is the NCIP regional offices. Each of those institutions have their role to play when we conduct research with IP community. What is important to note in this particular lecture, though, is that before any sample collection is done, in those communities, there should be appropriate and adequate community consultations. Hindi yung basta na lang tayo, boy, pahingi ba ang ilaway? Ilaway lang naman, bigay ka na. Bigyan kita ng karne norte mamaya. Or bigyan kita ng sardinas. Bigay ka ng laway. Hindi pwede yun. Bakit? We know that our DNA is our own. And in that DNA contains information that are vital to our persons. contains all the information about our metabolism, our propensity to disease, our health, our father and our mothers. Mamaya malaman nila hindi mo pala tatay yung tatay mo, akala mo tatay mo for the last 40 years. So that DNA contains information very, very important to an individual and therefore must be recognized by researchers. Tayo yung nangangatok, tayo ng gugulo. So before we do any of the research consultations, banda dito na, there needs to be community consultations. We need to tell the individuals in the community and the community leaders what the project is about, what we're going to do, what is the objective, and what is the benefit of that project for that research for them. Before ito nandyan yan before any sample collection, hindi pwedeng baliktarin. And in fact, alam na, I've said kanina, geographical isolations, hindi naman natin mapunta sa NSRI ang mga yun. Pwede. So if they don't come here, go there. Ganyan. So we've actually, throughout the years, we've actually tried to go to the locations where either up the mountains, across the river, crossing the hanging. Gumagalaw ka, hindi ako pinipress ba? Para ako wala akong hawak nandito kamay ko. Anyway, ayan, so never mind. So, check ko yung Dora. But we actually need to go to those communities. That's a challenge in research. We need to be able to achieve the objectives of the research. We cannot give in to the requirement of informed consent. We cannot give in the need for community consultations. If there is distance, solve it by going to them if they cannot come. So this is some of the photos. These are actual photos of some of our research projects. And in those research, Ara, in those research projects, in the communities, we need to explain what the project is to the level that they can understand. Wala pong kuryente, so hindi tayo pwedeng mag-PowerPoint presentation. Many of the places don't have electricity, don't actually have a built place for community engagements, etc. So we need to come by, we need to be able to be very creative and do that. But again, there needs to be information. Ma'am, hindi kami makapag-community consultation, walang kuryente. Problema mo yun. Magdala kang poster. Okay, so those are different. Kuya, talagang totoo yan Ewan ko. Sige, na lang natin. So there needs to be informed consent. So when you ask them, pwede po ba tayo na sumali sa aming project? For them to consent, they need to be informed. That's very critical. We need to respect the autonomy of the community and the autonomy of the individual. Which means that when we're doing vulnerable populations, there are actually 3 levels of consent. First, the institutional consent. That is the National Commission on Indigenous. So kami, pagka pumupunta doon, kailangan magpaalam ka muna sa NCIP. NCIP, by our laws, is the institution that protects the rights, mandated to protect the rights of people. So we tell them what our protocols are, we tell them tapos meron silang ina-assign na IKSP, Indigenous Knowledge System Practice Team. Nandito kami nag-represent pero andito ang IKSP team ng NCIP. Nagbabantay to make sure that we're doing what we said we're doing. So level of the institutional consent. The second level is also the community consent. Each community have their own cultural sensitivities on how they give consent. Meron silang recognized community leaders that may or may not be part of government, but they have a way of saying yes. So then we must respect, we need to find out what those are and we need to get the consent. And then even if the communities have already consented, individuals who will be the volunteers must individually consent. Kahit pumayag na yung leader at ayaw ng tao, again, ethically, you cannot collect. Why? Hindi siya pumayag eh. Consent has to be given by that individual. It's his DNA. And then as part of the work that we've done, and this is NCIP Administrative Order number 1 of 2012. Cute talaga ng of 2012. What happens here is that after the collection, samples have been collected, have been taken to the laboratory, have been analyzed, before we publish that data, before we publish the genetic testing results of the DNA from those communities, we need to go back to the communities and validate. Bakit? the DNA is theirs. It's not ours. So, bago mo sabihin sa buong mundo, kailangan malaman muna ng mga taong pinanggalingan ng DNA. And as part of that community validation, we also need to seek permission. Sir, ito po yung resulta namin. We're going to say this, etc. Does that go against any of your cultural beliefs or practices, etc.? And we need to be able to have that community validation or community consultation. Community validation through the community consultation. And that is what we did last year and the year before. When this is work that we've done. We've had from Occidental Mindoro was a work with archaeology, the School of Archaeology, the School of Archaeology, where we returned to Occidental and Oriental Mindoro to those places where the communities are. And we explained the DNA results to them and told them, alam niyo po yung DNA ninyo, mas magkamukha yung DNA hindi ko sasabihin sa inyo, mas kamukha yung ni group 1 at saka ni group 2, pero si group 3 parang mas pinsan ninyo, mas malayo-layo sa inyo. Tapos alam niyo sabi ni Occidental Mindoro, yung ibang leaders dun, sinabi ko na yan sa inyo, doktora, bago ka pa dumating eh. Bakit kailangan mo pa kaming i-DNA test? More or less. Well, it was very good to hear because it's consistent with what they knew based on their oral tradition and associations with different groups. This is with Mike Herrera and Jay Rodriguez. We went to Tawi-Tawi and Sulu. We had a Commission on Higher Education um, funded project to study the different groups, IP groups in Samba Sulta. So Tawi-Tawi, we've got the Sama de Laot, and then we've got also in Suluo, the Tausug, the Yakan, etc. So we also reported, this is not yet published. We are working on the papers now. But we went last year and the year before in order to report to the communities. And one thing that struck me, which is very important for researchers in our work, is that the communities, kahit natagal lang kami bago kami bumalik, the communities were very great because we returned to them and fulfilled the promise that we gave 5 years, 4 years ago. Sirs, ma'am, bigay niyo sa amin po yung sample ninyo. Our currency is trust. Pagkatiwalaan niyo po kami at babalik po kami kahit paano para iulat muna sa inyo kung ano yung resulta ng DNA testing bago namin sabihin sa ibang tao. And those were the meetings that we had in those trips. Now, one thing that, and the reason why I put this out here is, in my conclusion, I really believe that reference population databases are critical in any place that conducts genetic testing. As we've said, we need comparisons. We need to have those statistical calculations properly, properly vetted to the populations involved. Ang challenge lang when I was looking at the possibilities of having those reference databases in government agencies, ito po yung nakita ko. This was 2021. I didn't have any time to validate this, but I just pulled this out from the internet. Also this, the red tagging problems that we've had. So, and actually, sabi ko, Pilipinas lang ba yan nagkakaproblema when we talk about population databasing or research or associations with indigenous communities? This is Human Rights Watch. And actually, not only in the Philippines, India has problems, Congo, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia. So there are specific dynamics there that is too broad for us to really understand. But the point is, there are challenges when we conduct these types of research. So my proposal, which would be later in a later slide, is that the Philippine Population Reference Database should stay and be housed in an independent institution like a university. Don't put it in law enforcement. Law enforcement, you have your criminal database. Separate natin ang criminal database with the reference it. I think it's the ethical thing to do because there's no way that we can compromise or we should compromise the profiles, the DNA profiles of persons that are not part of a criminal investigation, particularly vulnerable populations, such as our indigenous. We published this 3 years ago, Ethical Challenges in Genetic Research among Philippine indigenous community, indigenous peoples, particularly focusing in Samba Sulta. And that's available online. So if anybody's interested, and also this particular chapter, ethical governance of forensic DNA databases in Southeast Asia. So what we've done with Professor Jimenez is we looked at the different databases in Southeast Asia, asking the question, where and how can we safeguard Philippine population reference databases? And ito na yung conclusion namin, part of our conclusion. Really, when we talk about ethics and protection of individuals, kasi ano ba ang ethics review? Ethics review, the primary goal of ethics review is to protect human participants in research. Try to balance the risks that potential individuals who will take part in that research, as well as the benefits. And in our discussion with Professor Jimenez, this is what we realized. There are five stakeholders in any research. One is the researcher. Second are the research institution. Third, funding agencies, research ethics committees, and scientific journals. The one in the middle are your research participants. In other words, for us to completely protect research participants, those five stakeholders must work together to form a house or protective mechanisms to be able to safeguard the rights of your research participants. So, research institutions, if you have researchers there that do not follow research ethics protocols, institutions are mandated to those reclamo. Agencies do not fund projects that have not been ethically reviewed by accredited research ethics comms. Research ethics committees, tayo, yung mga nandyan sa Facebook Live, tayo, we need to train to be able to understand the principles so that we can make sure that when we review protocols, we make sure that the principal investigators put mechanisms of protection. And then scientific journals, and we see this before we publish, there's a requirement to show that the research had been that had ethics clearance. Okay, recommendation. Criminal, not suspect databasing requires the passage of a detailed law. Do I support it? Yes, I support it. There is benefit in criminal database. We know this in the point of the police work, investigations. There is merit. We support it. One thing that we actually advocate is that DNA law, house in the police, house in FBI, no problem, should have the appropriate safeguards. And then in the Philippines, and this is my own personal opinion, maximize the fact that we have two independent investigating agencies. You have NBI and PNP. Is there a mechanism where they can actually safeguard, counter check each other such that any abuse of the database is prevented kasi meron kang mirror database in the other agencies. Anyway, those are things that we can really explore to improve our criminal justice. Strategize the collection of biological samples. Which crimes? Mahal mag-DNA databasing. So we need to, to be very responsible with our budget. Do not include children and street beggars, which I've already discussed. And this is one of the important um, recommendation that I make here. We need to actually work in partnership. Yeah, and this was the concept when the DNA analysis lab was started in 1996 here in UP. We know that PNP and BI cannot do research as much. Bakit? They are law enforcement. They have cases to finish. How can they do research? They have so many cases. At the same time, here in the DNA analysis lab, we don't do a lot of criminal investigations. Why? Hindi naman kami police. So what works is, I think I'm suggesting is there should be partnership between the institutions such that kami naman, when we do research, we are willing to share the results of those research so that the law enforcement can use to benefit society in their criminal investigation. Reference population database be university based. Given the problems with red tagging, with issues in cultural issues, let's just leave the reference database for the research institutions rather than law enforcement, so that there is no confusion as to what can and should be done. Provide safeguards to ensure data integrity, protocols for data and sample handling and storage. That's it. Thank you and have a good day. Puwede na po ang question and answer.
Hello po, ayun. Ah, thank you. So maraming salamat po Dr. Diungrea for that very insightful discussion. Right now we're allowing some discussions actually on the questions that we have received prior. Uh, Sorry, I'll just flash this on the screen. Okay, so the first question is: does ethics review include both human and animal subjects? Well, human participants and animal subjects.
Um, what we've got in the Philippines is the law defines ethics review involving human participants. So we need to clarify that a little bit. But for as long as your protocol involves humans, yes, definitely. Naman paano yung mga hayop? Different institutions have their protocols for animal welfare. In UP, we've got IACUC, which is the
Animal
Animal
care.
Care IACUC. Meron. Now, paano kung hayop lang talaga? Actually, one needs to look at the protocol individually. Kasi sometimes, and this is what we encountered with the project of Dr. Michael Herrera in Tawi-Tawi. Dr. Michael Herrera is focused on chicken diversity, native chicken. Pero yung native chicken, pag-aari ng tao. So bago ka pumunta dyan, hindi ka lang basta-basta na lang kukuha dun sa manok, di ba? Kailangan magpaalam ka sa tao. So what we've done in our Tawi-Tawi project is that we've included the section on chicken research in our ethics clearance. How will Dr. Michael Herrera obtain consent from the owners of the chicken? And how will Dr. Mike, if are there sensitivities? Ano yan ha, sambasutas, may sensitive yan tungkol sa sabong. It's also very much part of the culture. So we need to understand what are those sensitivities such that when the research was being conducted, there was proper information shared with the owners of the chicken and then proper consent to the collection of the feathers. Hindi naman namin pinatay yung manok. Yung feathers lang ang kinuha ni Mike. So again, answering that depende. Same thing if, for example, there are situations that involved, again, consent, then those projects, even if not directly with humans, will have to get clearance.
Thank you po. The next one is medyo mahaba siya.
Haba.
This was provided to us by someone who registered online. So, can the pursuit of justice through forensic genetic testing ever outweigh an individual's right to privacy? And if so, under what ethical conditions? Could we go over this one by one, ma'am? Is it ethically acceptable to use forensic genetic testing if it risks perpetuating discrimination or stigmatization of specific groups? Should the potential for false positives in genetic testing be deemed a moral obstacle significant enough to limit its use in criminal justice? And how do we balance this with the need for technological progress? Does the concept of consent in forensic genetic testing carry the same moral weight as in medical or personal contexts, particularly when the testing is involuntary or without full awareness? Can forensic genetic testing truly be objective, or is there an inherent bias in the interpretation of genetic data that challenges the ethics of its use in legal matters?
Kung sino ka man, um, ay, kung sino ka man. Can the pursuit of justice ever outweigh an individual's right to privacy? In genetic testing, the person has to consent to do the genetic testing. So if a person consents, like when we have here paternity questions, alleged paternity or questions of relationship, before we even collect samples from the individuals, they have to consent. Yung minor, there needs to be a legal guardian who will consent, an identified legal guardian who will consent to the genetic testing of a sample from the child. And the child himself or herself should consent if the child is capable of. Ano yun? Eh kung 15 years old siya, alam na niya, kailangan pumirma siya kung pumapayag siya. Si 10 years old o si 7 years old, naku kung tumatakbo yan, kailangan i-explain muna sa et cetera. So there's different level of consent. And if you look at the guidelines, merong assent, consent, et cetera. Merong verbal consent, et cetera. So one needs to look at that. So generally, the pursuit of justice outweigh individual's right to privacy for as long as ito reference profiles. there is no issue with privacy because when you consent, part of the consent defines what tests can be done. So kung nagpa-DNA profile ka dito, ma'am, para lang paternity testing, I cannot use your DNA test if you've got diabetes. Bakit? Hindi ka naman pumayag. So hindi ko ite-test. I am personally responsible. Whoever is the doctor is personally responsible that you cannot go beyond the consent of the individual that provided sample. So there should not be any problem. Pero paano ma'am yung mga suspect, arrestees, and convicted offender? Tanungin na lang natin ang mga abogado dyan na to a certain extent because the convicted offender, tama ba, sir? Convicted offender has offended or has created problems in society. There are certain rights that are tama ba? That, yung mga yan, it outweighs kasi meron kang potential harm to the security of the community. So that's why not everybody, but if there is a proof, there's probable cause to do the test. Meron tayong abogado dito sa bahay. If there's probable cause to do the test, then it can be done. But that determination must also be evaluated in court to a certain extent. So there are very clear considerations for those type of questions. Is it ethically acceptable to use if risks perpetuate discrimination or stigmatization of specific groups? In principle, those groups should not be stigmatized because when you do forensic genetic testing, it targets non-coding regions of the DNA, which means that yun lang po to identify. When you talk about stigmatization or discrimination, usually those are associated to disease, like certain types of behavior, which are not part of the standard protocol for forensic genetic testing. So again, before that genetic tests are done, persons should know what tests are going to be done and should consent. If they don't consent to certain types of tests, then we don't do that test. In principle, yun yung safeguard. Should the potential for false positives in genetic be deemed a moral obstacle? I don't know what you mean by false positives because we generate DNA profiles, we compare it to a crime scene as I've explained in the lecture, and then we provide a likelihood ratio, an estimate, statistic. I will never say na siya, uy, si J. Marfil, nag-match 100%, siya ang pinagalingan. We are not allowed. There are, in the profession of forensic scientists, we are not allowed to actually do the you or identify the person. What we can provide the court, kasi yung decision actually is the judge, not us. What we can provide the court is the likelihood that that match is a real match. So the likelihood ratio of 1 in 5 million, bahala na si judge. And judge in court will actually need, in principle, to look at the entirety of the entire case, not only the DNA evidence. Was the person in this province? Baka naman nasa Saudi Arabia, etc. So, what are the other evidences that have been presented to be able to provide proof to the reconstruction of the crime as is told by the prosecution? Does the concept of consent, ano to, in forensic carry the same moral weight as medical or personal context? Consent is a person's willingness to be part of the test. That's a thing. And then the tests have to be properly understood and has to be properly defined to the person who will be providing that consent. So in that context, magkaiba kasi yung medical at saka yung forensic. Tsaka iba rin yung crime scene test as well as paternity. Malaking impact ng paternity. For example, we've had some cases where people would come here. Si Lola, again, one case that struck me a lot. Si Lola nagpahula sa Quiapo. Tapos sabi ng manghuhula, I'm not mentioning it. Sabi ni manghuhula, hindi mo apo yan. So yan, narattle na si Lola. Hindi ko apo yan, hindi ko apo yan. Dinala dyan dito yung bata, hindi kasama yung nanay at tatay. Hindi ko alam kung ano, anak, pero pa-test kaya natin, kuha kong sample. Una, hindi siya pwede magbipit ng sample ng kanyang anak. Kasi the anak has to come and consent to the test. Pangalawa, lola ka, kailangan mo pumayag yung nanay at yung tatay niya. So that yung impact niyan is if ever that is found, what will happen to the child in case the child is not part of the family? What happens to the child? Those are great, big considerations that need to be understood by the family. before tests are done. Can forensic genetics truly be objective, or is there an inherent bias interpretation of genetic data? Um, we get the DNA profile, so we run the samples, we generate the DNA profiles. There are certain situations when you need to make judgments to the interpretation of the data. There's just a field, if you want to read on this, is the field called cognitive bias. So generally, standard operating procedures will generate very straightforward DNA profiles. But there are certain situations, especially if there are compromised samples, when the testing may be a bit harder, and therefore there are certain judgments. Now, when we have those situations, there needs to be standard operating procedures per lab, and a quality assurance such that if we are not certain about the DNA profiles, then we do not report. That's our standard here in the DNA analysis lab. Pag nakikita namin, okay, meron niyang signal, pero hindi namin maulit or hindi namin really ma-decipher, we'd report as a standard procedure inconclusive rather than report a definitive DNA profile because that DNA profile is not definitive. So those are safeguards that need to be defined by each of the labs. Oh, finish na. Nasagot ko.
Oo nga, ma'am, eh. I think there are 4 more questions. Opo. Does scientific advancement, ito yung next, ma'am, 'no, make ethically practicing forensic genetic testing easier or more challenging?
It depends on the scientific advancement. Okay, there are scientific advancement that makes results more solid. That makes genetic testing easier. But there are certain scientific advancements, such as familial DNA searching. It kind of makes it more challenging because you need to balance familial DNA search. You've got the software, mahahanap mo ma'am sa 5 million US persons in the CODIS, mahahanap mo yung mga relatives ng probative sample. But there are ethical issues there. So that makes it more challenging. Should I not? Etc. So those are considerations that need to be properly vetted with the populations and with the institutions or with the law, and then safeguards properly formulated to prevent abuse.
Actually, I want to dovetail on that. Gaano kabilis yung responsiveness nung ethics standards when it comes to scientific advancement?
Actually, ngayon pa lang talaga, ngayon pa lang ha, I mean, na nagkakaroon ng issues or pinag-uusapan ng ethics in forensic genetic testing. Kung tatandaan ninyo, ang forensic genetic testing usually are with crime laboratories. And these are casework, not research. So in the past, there's no issue on ethics. But now, because we are really pushing for the protection of human participants, individuals involved, then there are conversations about ethics review. Particularly if you check papers, merong mga papers na retract. There are a number of Chinese papers that have been retracted. Generic profile nila, pero the group could not provide informed consent na pumayag yung mga individuals to be part of. And you check the papers online. So and then also even some of the DNA databases, they had to remove certain profiles because it was clear that the source or the group that contributed the profiles did not have the consent of the individuals or could not demonstrate there was consent. So those databases had to remove samples.
And I think this would be the second to the last. Do ethical concerns vary depending on the race, class, and or gender of the victim or suspect to be tested?
Uh, Ethical concerns. Okay. Strictly, there are frameworks that applies to all. You know, you have to have your autonomy. There needs to be consent. People need to know what's going to be done to the DNA, etc. But we cannot limit that in terms of that cultural sensitivity. So I'll give you a specific example. When we go to the IP communities, before we report, we tell them what the results say. Ito po, I was saying kanina, mas magkamukha kayo nito. Meron situations and which needs to be properly handled with the people of the area. Pag sinabing mong mas magkamukha o mas similar itong grupo na to at saka itong grupo na to, how does that affect the cultural dynamics in the area? Kasi meron silang sarili mga paniniwala na baka maapektuhan ng genetics mo, genetic test results. And what we need to do as researchers is we need to put that genetic test results in context to the history and culture of those communities in the area. Hindi ka lang, hindi, magkamukha kayo, tapos na. Kasi ito yung test ko, yan ang lumabas. Hindi. Bakit ganyan ang lumabas? Ano yung interaction nyo bago kami nag-test results? Saan kami kumuha? Contemporary samples? Or kumuha kami ng archaeological? Magkaiba yan. May dating. O archaeological samples ba ang genetic test natin? Or yung samples ba nakuha yon bago dumating yung mga Amerikano dito? Yung time na etc. So those needs to be taken into account because individuals, humans, do not exist on their own in a silo. We need to take all the other metadata in. And that's the beauty of research. We take those in.
But this is what role does the continuous dialogue between scientists, legal experts, and the public play in upholding ethical principles in forensic genetic tests?
Kayo ha? Those 44 people on Facebook Live. Matatalino kayo. All right. So for me, as a starting point, regardless of whether it's forensic genetic testing, any research needs to always have continuous dialogue with the community because we need to understand what these results mean and how it impacts on. So we need to actually, kung nasa Facebook ka live kayo, we need your input as to what the genetic tests means and how it will impact you as individuals, as people. Now, in terms of with legal experts, it's important to dialogue. Legal experts, the judges, the police. Bakit? Stakeholders. When we do research, we need to understand who will use the technology and what is needed by the community. So this continuous dialogue provides us that information on what we can prioritize our research such that it creates impact and answers the need of the community. Also, we need to talk to legal experts. Bakit? Kasi ano bang tinatanong ng mga abogado? Ano bang kailangan ng judge sa korte? Ano bang mga kasong natatanggap nila para yun at naiintindihan ba nila yung limitations ng genetic test results? So those conversations very critical. If you have whoever wrote these questions, if you have ideas and you want to chat with us, you are more than welcome to come over and tell us your opinions and dialogue with us. So that's an open invitation.
And lastly, what role does ethics play in maintaining public trust and public confidence in DNA analysis?
A lot. A lot. When you do, and I'm talking about research first, research our currency. Well, we have a currency in terms of funding agencies. But when we do research involving human participants in the over 20 years that I've been doing research, one major currency in this work is trust. Kasi hindi ka makakakuha ng human volunteers pag hindi ka pinagkakatiwalaan. And in fact, and I say this to people, when I was doing field work in Mindoro, in Sulu, in Tawi-Tawi with all our other collaborators, kahit anong pag-explain mo ng technology, to a certain extent, maski naman bata, maski ako, meron talagang hindi na maiintindihan. Kasi very technical na yan, hindi na nila naiintindihan. Ako ba, minsan hindi na rin natin naiintindihan. Pero pumapayag pa rin sila. And one old man, I think he was about 90 odd. Ni-explain ko yung, "Sir, ano 'to, nasa Mindoro kami. Sir, ito po gagawin namin sa sample niyo, sa laway niyo, dadalhin namin sa laboratorio, ganyan, ganyan." "Oh, sige, sige, sige." Payag na siya, payag na siya. "Sir, pagkatapos po namin gawain DNA test, puwede po ba namin, itago muna yung sample ninyo for secondary use kasi baka may mayroong mga bagong equipment na ma-develop in the future, puwede ko po bang itago?" Gumanon na siya, sabi niya, "Anak, anak, kung gusto mong itanong sa'kin, binigay ko na, 'di ba? Pinagkatiwalaan na kita, 'di ba? So kung anong gagawin mo diyan, gawin mo na." Parang gusto ko nang umuwi. Hindi, gawin mo na. And then in that, it was very simple. Like if, I've given you my trust. I'm here, I'm talking to you. Why are you asking me a lot of questions? Because I've already shared with you what you have asked of me. So, ang nakikita ko diyan, when we as researchers show that we try our best to the best of our ability to protect those human participants, then that increases the trust. And paminsan naman kahit principal investigator tayo, hindi na natin na alam lahat. That is the role of an ethics review committee. Such that ikaw biased ka eh. Project mo yan eh. Love mo yan eh. Tapos hindi mo nakikita lahat ang pwedeng maging harm. Bakit bias ka nga? Pinaghirapan, pinagpuyatan mo yan. So it's important that an independent group, such as an independent trained group, should review your protocol to see if there is any other hole in that protocol, such that they can make recommendations to improve the protocol. And if we keep on doing this, trust increases and makes the research more protective of its human participants. That's why it's critical.
Eh, marami pong salamat. Actually, before we end this event, we would like to thank those who participated through Zoom. I think we had a total of 68 earlier. Marami sa kanila are actually already reviewers, identified reviewers of the UPD Research Ethics Board. So marami pong salamat. Thank you po for all the participants as well sa Facebook Live. For any other questions, we can address them via email. Maybe you can email us. We have all the information online as well. And to recognize the effort and then the service provided to us by our dear speaker. We are providing Dr. De Ungre a certificate of appreciation from the UP Diliman Research Ethics Board to academician Maria Corazon De Ungrea for exemplifying your expertise and contributing invaluable knowledge as resource speaker on ethical issues in forensic genetic testing during the first episode of the 2025 UPD Research Ethics Board monthly ethics seminar series Etika Inan at Etika Alaman conducted on January 17, 2025 at the NSRI conference room and Zoom and Facebook Live. Marami pong salamat. Thank you. Marami pong salamat. Okay. Marami po salamat. And then lastly, siguro for the information of everyone, and apologies po sa on-site participants. For those online participants, you can use this link for the evaluation form. And for next month's ethics seminar episode, we will have Dr. Rodelyn Wani Obias, assistant professor from the Department of History here in UP Diliman, for her lecture on ethics in historical research in the Philippines. This will be on February 13, same time, also online and on-site. And for those on-site participants, again, marami pong salamat for the evaluation for you to get the certificate of participation. Nandun lang po siya sa table. Marami pong salamat again. Have a good afternoon. Thank you po.